Good afternoon here, and my name is Chris Romeo, and the name of my talk for today is AppSec Awareness, a Blueprint for Security Culture Change. I'm really excited to be here today, and thanks to everybody for sticking around here. I know we're right in front of the social hour. When I first looked at the program, I thought my talk was side by side with the social hour, and I got really afraid, but then I looked closer and saw, you know what, the social hour starts after we finish up here today. So a little bit about me. So I'm the CEO of my own company that I just started here in January. And I've been in the security business for around 20 years, doing a number of different things, pretty much everything across the spectrum from the world of information and application security, incident response, secure product development, lots of different things. And I was able to spend 10 years of that at Cisco Systems as part of the central security team there. And I've had the advantage to speak at a number of different conferences around the world and share this story that I'll share with you today. So really the agenda that I have for this talk, first I want to just introduce kind of what I see as the problem space here, or why do we even need this thing that I call application security awareness? What is it going to do for you? Oh, now I'm looking to my, I don't think I did anything. I'm going to turn it off and back on again. Okay, well, so what I'm going to talk about here today is to start with the problem space, and I'm going to talk to you about what I call a sustainable security culture, kind of introduce the concepts behind that. And then we'll talk about how you can actually go about creating your own application security awareness program based on the principles that I'll share with you here. But just to help me kind of know who I'm speaking to here, if you're part of an application security function in your organization, raise your hand. Let me see. Okay, we got a good maybe 32% or so. How about the information security side? Is that everybody else? That's almost everybody else. There's still a few stragglers. What did I miss? Audit? Anybody from the audit? No? Any professional golf players? No? None of those. Okay. All right. So, I guess that gives me a good perspective to, kind of speak more to the information security side, perhaps. Okay. Well, I'm going to just go ahead and keep moving here, and eventually the picture will show up behind me. But I'm just going to act like I'm a professional, and I don't even know that this thing's missing from behind me here. But really the first thing I wanted to share with you is I took this quote from this famous philosopher of Silicon Valley, a guy by the name of Mark Andreessen. He gave us the Mosaic browser and Netscape and a bunch of other things, and he's a multi-billionaire. But he shares this idea of software is eating the world, okay? And this, it's kind of an interesting quote, kind of a pithy quote. But what he really means is that there's software in everything these days, right? I mean, we know this as security professionals. We see the easy things like, the firewalls and desktops and all the things that we deal with. But there's also, cars, smartphones, medical devices, even power plants. I've been studying that over the last couple of months, and it's scary how much software and technology is actually driving the average nuclear power plant. But that just reminds us how important it is from an application security perspective to really, do application security well, because software is everywhere. It is sprinkled into everything that we do. So customers also demand security in everything that we provide them. And everybody has a customer, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're a product company, it's very easy to understand who your customers are. If you're a bank, it's the people that keep their money with you. But the point here is that none of those people are going to tell you, oh, security, that doesn't really matter to me. Okay, I don't really care about security. It's not something I'm really concerned about. Everybody has a perspective on security at this point, and so that's everybody cares about it. No one's going to come sit across the table from you and say, nah, I don't really care. It's fine. Work on availability. Security is not something I really care about. And we know that, vulnerabilities and bug counts, these things do continue to rise like crazy. Think about all the different giant vulnerabilities we've had in the last 2 years that have their own marketing campaigns, right? Why does a vulnerability need a website? I don't know. Why does, the Heartbleeds and, the Drown, Bashbug, Poodle, all these things, they have their own marketing department almost at this point. But those aren't even the vulnerabilities that really keep me up at night, though. The ones that I'm more concerned with are the vulnerabilities that we capture within the OWASP top 10. You know, everybody in this room knows this. You probably live this you know, the different vulnerabilities that exist here. But it's crazy how many times organizations can't even get the OWASP top 1 right. You know, I mean, I'd love to see us just call it the OWASP top 3 for a couple of years. Let's knock out these first 3, and the guys from Cigital talked about that a little bit earlier. But let's compress this down and just work on a couple of them at a time, because, you know, we can't even fix the first one on the list. And, you know, I borrowed this from the nice folks at Veracode. They had this, they had this state of application security report that they do. And I thought it was relatively eye-opening, though, to look at this and see across the different industries, the best we can do is say that the best of the worst. How many of these their applications fail the OWASP top 10 upon initial risk assessment? Financial services comes in at 58%, which is the best score. Government up there at 76%. So this tells me that the developers in these organizations don't really know what they need to do for security. You know, they don't know what needs to be developed there. Where do these vulnerabilities come into the process? Where are they introduced here? This is it's a typical secure development lifecycle, or secure software development lifecycle, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of standard, but from my perspective, I see these things come in the design and the development phase. That's where most of these issues come in. That's where these it could be that they're mistakes. It could be that they're just bad decisions. That happens way too many times, where somebody just makes truly a bad decision. They should know better, but nobody's ever taught them the lesson about SQL injection or whatever the lesson might be. And I know everybody loves this type of a chart because it shows how, I see the guy from Cigital nodding his head who was making fun of this type of a chart earlier. That's why I mentioned it now. But it's based on IBM's research. We all know this. It just makes sense. It's common sense, but unfortunately common sense isn't always that common in every organization that I find as I go around. Right? But it makes sense that it's going to cost more to fix a bug later on in the life cycle. So let's stop for a second and think about what is the average developer? What's the mindset of the average developer in your organization? So stop for just a second and think about that, right? Because everybody in this room probably has at least one developer that works in your company. And so you might say that, you're about to make a statement about these developers, but we have this small group of people that doesn't fit that. Okay, so I said the average developer, not the one security conscious developer you might have on your team who loves security and comes to conferences and might be sitting next to you in the room right now. But when you think about, what does a developer work towards? Well, bug-free, code that is delivered on time, feature complete, is it on budget? And, I think about when you ask developers or anybody, they'll say, you can have 2 out of 3 things, good, fast, or cheap. And I tend to lump secure in with that good category there. So this is kind of the mindset that they're working towards. They're focused on, I have to ship the code, I have to get these things out, and security, if it's not embedded in the culture of their organization and it's not what they know and understand, then that's not going to be their first thought. And what I find is that ultimately, when I look and work with big organizations, security is a stretch for almost everyone in the organization. Maybe not the central security teams if they exist, depending on the maturity of the organization. But it really comes down to people just don't understand what the real problem is from a security perspective. They don't understand the cost, the risk, and all these things that are being introduced. And they don't have that foundational knowledge of what even is application security. Maybe they have a person that focuses on it. Maybe they have a couple, depending on how big the company is, but the average person that you talk to doesn't get what the challenge is there. They don't understand the ramifications of not doing something right. They don't understand what a SQL injection is. The average web programmer doesn't understand what that is. They don't understand what the concept is and what causes it. Cross-site scripting. But the bigger problem that I always find is, and I think where we tend to fall down quite a bit, is we don't teach people why. Why should you care about this stuff? We don't start with why. We start with, here's all the secure coding techniques that you need to learn, and we'll send you to maybe a 40-hour class where you'll just dive deep into it, and then unfortunately over the next couple of months you'll forget everything that you learned there. But we don't set that precedent of why do you need to care about these things. And what I find is that, the developers that I work with and talk to, these are not monsters, they're not sociopaths that are like, I'm going to show these security people, I'm not going to do security anymore. They're not taking that mindset, they just don't understand, right? We're asking them to be accountable for something that we haven't bothered to stop and actually teach those basic lessons to. Can developers sometimes be stubborn? Sure, I'll admit that, but they're not evil. They'll do the right thing if we spend the time to instruct them and teach them as far as what they need to do. So, from my perspective, when I'm looking and working with an individual organization and thinking about how can we improve the security culture here, I want to get to the point where we have developers that think like security people. Okay, I don't want developers that think like hackers. Okay, that's the buzz, everybody throws that around. I don't want, you can't teach a developer to think like a hacker, because to truly think like a hacker, someone from the bad perspective, you have to have that, I want to steal money, you have to have that little bit of evil nature that's driving you there. And so I'm more about, let's teach developers to think like security people. Doesn't mean they're all going to be security experts, of course not. They don't all need to be security experts. We have some of those folks in the central security team that can provide that support. We just want everybody to feel like they're part of the solution and understand why it's important. So, I've kind of introduced what I'm going to talk about here. From an RVAsec perspective, I mentioned this already. Everybody in the room, your organization builds something, right? I don't know what it is, but you have developers that are building products, web apps, services, or those types of different things. And so you have a need to make security a top priority from their perspective. And if you're here and you're passionate about security, the rest of this talk I'm going to go into how can you actually build something in your organization to do this, based on what experience that I've had in the past. Let's talk for a second about security culture. And to do that, I had to go to another philosopher of Silicon Valley, Tim Ferriss, from the 4-hour work week perspective, if you've ever heard of him. And he actually threw out this definition of culture, saying he didn't have the bullet, that's what I added in. But he said, what happens when people are left to their own devices is a good definition of a generic culture. And I thought, that's kind of an interesting way to think about it. What if we add with security in the middle? What happens with security when people are left to their own devices? Do they make the right decision? Do they make the secure coding? Do they make the decision that we want to provide a secure design of a particular feature? Or do they say, nobody's looking and I'm just going to take the shortest path, the least path of resistance to getting me, out of the office at the end of the day? So application security does come back to the people. Okay, that's one of my main tenets that I always focus on. It comes down to the problems come from the people. And so tool vendors tend to disagree with me. They tend to say, well, the problem is that we don't have the right tools. Application security is about the tool sets and things. And I would agree at a more minimum level, yeah, the tool sets are important. But if you don't have people that know how to use the tools and understand the concepts, then the tools are, really not that beneficial to anybody. And ultimately, the people are the ones that introduce the vulnerabilities into these products and into this code anyway, right? I mean, think about what are the two most likely things that have caused a data breach for a given company. One, somebody left a laptop in a car. We've heard a number of news stories about that. There was one in the DoD where somebody had left a laptop and somebody grabbed it unencrypted with hundreds of thousands of records, or something like SQL injection. But SQL injection didn't just get planted in there, right? A developer made a decision not to use parameterized queries and the things that go along with that, and so they made a bad design decision. But so it comes back to the people. So why do we need to change the security culture at all? Well, we're talking about the fact that people are making bad decisions, right? Clearly, that guy has a tattoo on his back that says, clearly I have made some bad decisions. That tattoo in all to itself is probably a bad decision, right? Maybe the security process is broken or doesn't even exist. I've seen places like that where where I walk in and they say, hey, I say, hey, what's your security development lifecycle or look like? And they say, what? What's that? Okay, now I know where we have to start from that process. But now I know that gives me a good metric of your security culture at that point. If you don't even have security even thought about in the lifecycle, much less implemented. Or maybe you don't have tools, or they're not tuned, they're not existent, into your system there. So when I think about a security culture, these are some of the features, what I call the defining features of this. And I like to think of this as a sustainable security culture, okay? Security culture is something that takes to change any culture, right? It takes a long time. It's not going to happen in one quarter and $1 million and we're all going to be secure, we're all going to be security conscious. No, this is going to take a long time. So you have to be in this for the long haul. You have to take this idea that we're going to do something that's going to be sustainable. So in 5 years, we're going to look back and we're going to say, wow, remember how we used to be? How bad off we used to be from a process perspective, from a knowledge perspective. And we're going to have the ability to really look into look at how good we are now. To really rock the boat when it comes to security culture, first you have to be deliberate. Okay, nobody ever just stumbled into a secure mindset in an organization. It doesn't just happen. Well, everybody woke up today and they started thinking security was cool and they want to do the right thing here, right? You have to be deliberate. You have to be disruptive. You have to rock the boat some. If somebody is not mad at you as a result of the things you're trying to do to change the security culture, you didn't go far enough, right? You should at least have a couple of angry emails and people screaming at you. That's a good thing in the beginning. The other thing is, make it engaging and fun. Too often security is seen as boring and, it's just not that interesting. Try and look for ways to make your security culture have, more fun. Be more fun as security people. And then from a rewarding perspective, you got to find ways to reward people, right? People like to be rewarded. People like to hear, hey, you did a good job. They like to get an email from their manager saying you did something good here. They like to receive, different benefits and things. So figure out how you can reward people for making the right decisions instead of always, we're good at slamming people over the head when they make the wrong decision. That's easy, right? How do we reward them for making the right decision along the way? And then the fourth one there, return on investment, that's just to make the executives happy. They want to know what, you want me to spend how much money, and what's going to be my return on it? That's that number that you need for them. So how do we go about then changing a security culture, right? Because every organization has some type of security culture. It might be not great. It might be, pretty decent. What are some things that we can do to affect and impact all of our people, in the organization? And so the first thing we can do is what I like to call open their eyes. Okay, we're going to try to open up everyone's eyes to what is application security for everyone within our organization. I think of this as just general awareness. Okay, it's how can we provide them with those foundational things, like, for example, standard vocabulary, right? It's amazing what happens when all the developers in your organization learn what an exploit and a vulnerability and a 0-day and all of those basic things that everyone in the room here, we take those for granted. We throw those words around like, it's part of our vocabulary that we all use in our day-to-day existence. The average developer out there doesn't do that. They don't have that, they don't use those words like we do. And the next thing to think about from a culture change perspective is let's fill their brains with some knowledge. Okay, let's give them some knowledge that's specific to what they do in their job, from role-specific things. So developers, we're going to want to provide them with, certain additional lessons that are going to be different from what we're going to ask of a tester to do, for example. But fill their brains with the knowledge of application security. The second part that I list here under fill their brains is this idea of history. So every organization has a security history. Right? You've had bugs that have happened, that, when you created a new product and it was 10 years ago, there's a number of bugs that have happened over time, and you have that in a database. You can go back and mine it and understand it. It's important to know what are those top problems that you've had in the past so that you can have a plan for how you're going to address them in the future. Don't just ignore the history of what happened, but roll that into your idea to change culture in your organization. It's also good to use specific examples, directly from your products when you're teaching somebody about how to avoid a problem in the in the future that occurred in the past. If you take something that's generic, it's not as hard hitting as if you take an example that came right from what they work on every day. Because what I always notice is when you do that, you throw that example in front of a developer of what they work on every day, they lean in a little bit closer. Because they're like, yeah, before you were talking about something like, OpenSSL, something I don't really care about. Now you're talking about something that I own and that I work on. So that's important to use specific things, to help them understand. Making it role-specific, filling their brains with that knowledge that's role-specific, right? You don't really want to have your C developers spend a lot of time on secure coding in Java, right? They're gonna look at that and say this isn't positively impacting me at all. So we have to keep this, specific to what they actually do in their day-to-day perspective. And then the last part of this is what I like to call, directly for the individuals, is tasking their hands. Give them some activities, some things to do, right? When we do traditional training, I mentioned it before, over a 6-month time after somebody does a training class, you have this curve of as they lose the knowledge that they picked up. And why are they losing that knowledge on that type of a curve? Because they're not actually putting it into use right away. So if you're going to teach somebody something, make sure you have a set of activities and things that they can actually then use those new skills and embed those new skills and encourage them and reward them for doing that, because then they'll do it and then you'll get more value out of the lessons that you've taught them. And it really cements that knowledge for them that they've learned about application security. Community's the final piece of this set. And I think of, community is a place where I think we really fall down in a lot of inside of a lot of organizations, especially from a security community perspective. Most organizations that I work with don't have gatherings like this internal to the company. We used to do this at Cisco. I used to run a conference series inside of Cisco called SecCon that was all internal, and we had about 500 employees that would come together for this type of a gathering from inside the company. But I don't think we do enough of this community type of building, because I think there's a lot of value in people teaching each other from within a network. And we're good at doing that from an external perspective at events like this, but we don't do it very good inside of our organizations. And it can be as simple as doing something like a hackathon or whatever inside of your organization. But I think you have to work to build security community, because I think that's the foundation of this culture change, is having a group of people that are connected together, that can encourage each other, they can mentor new people, and you can really see some good things that come out of that. And so, from a solution perspective, every popular movie in the last 3 years, there's been a superhero that comes in and saves the day. Unfortunately, we don't have that in the field of application security. There's no application security Batman or something. But there are things that we can do to build an individual program. And so, when I talk about an application security awareness program, this is the idea of taking all these things that I just talked about, raising awareness, adding knowledge, providing knowledge and history, activity, community, putting it all together as something that exists as a program inside of your organization. And so here's a way to think about kind of where application security awareness fits, because it kind of sounds like security awareness, but it's really not. Security awareness, I think of that as it's your anti-phishing training. It's your don't let people chase you in the door after. If they don't have a badge, confront them. If somebody sounds too good to be true on the phone, they probably are. Don't give the Microsoft support person all your information, right? We've all had family members we've had to take that call for. I know everybody in the room has at this point. And then at the other end of the extreme, there's security training. And what I think of security training is, this is the 40 hours where we're taking somebody deeply into the world of secure coding. And so, what I've built for other people is something that exists kind of in the center here, because, I think a traditional training it's relatively boring, usually. If you think about maybe if you've done like a hacking class or something like, at a security conference, that's a type of a class that's pretty engaging. But the average secure coding class that we would send our developers to is it's not going to be super energetic for them to do that. So I think of this idea as how do we provide some of that security training, some of the awareness across the board, but do it in a form factor that everybody in our organization will be able to take advantage of. And we want to be able to tailor it for your organization as well, right? Because there's certain things that you can't talk about that you're not going to get from just a standard secure coding training class. It's not going to be tailored towards the problems that you've had in the past. So just to kind of summarize a couple of things about what the benefits are of doing this type of a program. Everybody gets that foundational knowledge of application security, but with a minimal investment, right? We're not asking anybody to sit in a training class for a week because, in the average organization, that doesn't happen, right? I mean, I told you, I was at Cisco for 10 years. We had somewhere around 25 or 30,000 developers. You think I could get even 1% of those people into a 1 week long class in a given calendar year? Not a chance. 1% is what out of that, 250 people? I could probably get 100 maybe out of the year, but it's just not the way development cycles work in big companies, right? You're not going to take everybody, because if you start adding up the man years that go to that, that starts to break down. Provide a defined mission, from security activities, and then, coming back around with that community. So what I'm going to tell you for the rest of the time here is, I don't work for Cisco anymore now, but I built a program like this that I've been describing inside the walls of Cisco, and they do let me talk about it to some degree. So what I'm about to share here is based on lessons learned over 5 years of building one of these things and creating it and watching it grow and blossom. And at last count, that program had touched a lot of people within Cisco. So it had gone viral within the company, and people were getting into security training without being forced, which is the ultimate goal for any type of security culture change event. If you can get people to jump in and do it without someone twisting their arm, then you're almost all the way there. So I'm going to break this down into 4 different pieces, right? There's program architecture, there's content, or how you can go about actually connecting with the people you want to reach. There is the idea of how do we mix in some humor and some story and some fun into our content, so it's not just boring talking about SQL injection for 6 hours in a row. And then one of the new kind of hot things in the world of everything, gamification, right? How do we add some game-like things into our learning environment of security to try and get people more engaged? So the first phase here is our program architecture phase. And at this point, we want to just work out some design decisions for our program, okay? Because we want to be able to document what's going on. And the way that I think the best way I'd recommend to people to start this is you have to step back and assess your security culture and look and see what you have at this point. Do you have a secure development lifecycle? Can people spell security in the organization? So you want to go out and the best way to do this is, focus groups that are going across section of the entire organization, interviewing people. I would just walk up and ask people sometimes, someone that I didn't even know, because if you know them already, they know where you're coming from. They'll think they might give you the answer you want to hear. But just in the lunchroom, so what do you know about, building secure products here? See what they say, But go through that assessment process because that'll really help you to make a lot of decisions, a lot of these next few decisions. And you want to make sure you're not, acting without data for the decisions that you have to make. Because really the next thing, or the next big thing here is, what is the problem that exists in your organization? And that'll come out of doing the assessment here. Is there just not a lot of application security knowledge? Do people not even understand threats? Do we have a process, but people don't really use it, and they don't even know what they're supposed to do with it? Is there motivation? Do we lack motivation to improve security in the organization? What's the problem? That's what you have to really figure out here, because we're going to build a solution to do that, and we want to make sure we know. Building a team. So you can't do this, obviously, as an individual. It's very difficult to do by yourself, and this is a place where there are other passionate security people in your organization. So if you leave here today and you say, I want to do this, I want to build something like this inside of my company, there's other passionate security people, and you probably could list them right now, the 5 people that you could reach out to and say, I got this crazy idea, I need your help. And they'll jump in and be willing to help you, whether that means they're going to help you create content or review content or just act as a subject matter expert. There's a lot of different ways you can approach it there. One other thing on building a team, so when I got into this at Cisco, I am not a training, learning, and development person, right? I've been in the security business forever. I didn't really know what I didn't know in that world. But I did learn that there's these people called psychometricians, which has got to be almost the coolest job description business card you could have there. But they're experts in the learning process, and it's somebody that you can lean on here that you should make part of your core team to figure out, because You know, for example, it's really hard to write an assessment question. No, it's easy to write an assessment question. It's hard to write a good, fair assessment question. If you've ever taken a certification test, right, there's always that question where you're like, no, I disagree. Let me talk to the author, you know, we'll straighten it out. That's what these psychometrician people do, is help you kind of ensure you're doing the right thing there. A big part of having a successful program here is you gotta choose a theme. Okay? It's got to be something fun that people can get engaged with and have some fun with. At Cisco, I used the idea of security ninjas. Okay? That allowed me, it was almost too easy. I borrowed the idea from Adobe. But it allowed me to have all kinds of graphics created and visuals and things and just advertise. And what we found is everybody wanted to be a security ninja, because it just, you know, they thought it sounded cool. The average developer said, that sounds kind of cool, I want to be a security ninja. So the theme drew them in to want to do the training. Some organizations, that name maybe doesn't work, it doesn't work for you. What about, you could have a security apprentice followed by a security journeyman and kind of use the old school craftsman's perspective of describing somebody's tool, capabilities. You could even use a nautical theme, but the point here is that you want to get something that everybody in your organization, if there's something that's in your organizational culture already that people like and are excited about, take advantage of that, So it just kind of comes out in that assessment as well. Stay away from anything controversial, obviously, that'll cause HR to be chasing you around. The second very important design decision is people want individual levels in a system like this. Okay? They don't want to take one 40-hour class to be done. They want to be able to see a journey that exists across this type of a training program. Okay? And this gives you a very rough idea of what I did at Cisco. Everybody wanted to be a black belt, a security black belt. But what they could see in the program as we built it up is that they started to learn some content, pass some assessments, that got them a white belt. They got excited, they got recognized, they got pumped up about it. Then they went on to, becoming a yellow belt and moving on up the chain here. But the levels really do cause someone to be able to see, if I start here, I can end here, and here's the marking post along the road for me to get to this other spot. So that's very beneficial to keep people engaged. Roles. So what are the detailed roles that you want to go after in your organization? My advice is never to start with this entire chart and try to create something that captures all these people. Pick the one that's the most people. At Cisco, we started with the software engineer because there were more of them than anybody else. So we thought, we'll go with the law of averages and say if we have a bigger population, we can get more people engaged in it. But you may have even other things I don't have listed here. My point, one of the other points here is that there is an everyone role here, right? This is something that everyone should get at least a small piece of, regardless of what they do in the company, even if they never touch code. Some people always, they wonder, why would you put sales up there? It's when your salespeople have knowledge, foundational knowledge of your application security practices, they can use that while they're talking to a customer. When a customer asks them a wild question about, oh, you guys don't know anything about security. Oh, yeah, we do. We have this thing called a secure development lifecycle. They're not going to be an expert in it, no, but you can they can have a basic foundational knowledge there. So design decision 3 is to figure out what are the roles I want to go after here that are going to be part of my program. And then design decision 4 is activities. Okay, so I forgot to mention here, one of the things that I do with this level system is usually the first 3 levels, that's where we're going to give you knowledge. We're going to provide you facts and let you watch videos and things. But when you get to that brown and black belt level, you got to start doing something for security in the organization. And that's where these activities comes in and behaviors. So what we do is we provide a very high level set of activities that people can actually go after and do. You might look at that and say, oh, well, it's way too high level. Yeah, that's done on purpose, right? I don't really care. I'm not going to argue with somebody about, what they're calling their activity. I'm just interested in the fact they're going to do something to make security better. So what you can do is you can use a system like this to provide points, and then, for that brown and black belt, you get a certain number of points. You get a brown belt, certain number of points. You get a black belt, whatever you call the levels. But you can actually put people to work doing things, and you're almost tricking them into improving security. Right? Because they're thinking, their motivation is, I want to get that next belt in this system so I can be recognized and be rewarded. But they're actually making security better by what those activities that they do. Recognition comes into this. A couple of things that I'm a big fan of doing that you can use to recognize people that participate in this program with you. You can do something with lanyards. You can do something with individual certificates, sending emails. I find that cold hard cash is a good way to reward the average person, at least in America. It's funny though that other parts of the world, the certificates are almost worth more than money. Like in India and in China, other places that I've done this for. I would travel to our offices in Bangalore, India, and I'd walk down through the hallway, and there'd be cubes on all the sides, and I would see these certificates hanging up in the cubes, and it was pretty cool to see. But that was a cultural thing that they were more interested in being able to show off the fact that they had that knowledge. Now I never saw them in America, but that's just something that was cultural. So this, budget and schedule, this question always comes up. How much does it cost to do this? Well, anything from $0 to $5 million, basically, however much you want to put into it. This type of a program, to build it does take time, right? It's not something that you're going to say, I'm going to work for the next 3 months, and we're going to deploy this whole thing out, and it's going to be good to go, right? It's something that you have to kind of expect it's going to take a while. So then when we start to talk about content, so I'm a big fan of doing this type of knowledge via video because it goes worldwide. It doesn't require me to do something more than once. It can be recorded and then it can be distributed out throughout the world. But I also still take a very different approach to doing this type of content. I like to do conversational and unscripted security content. The worst training you'll ever hear is where you can tell the person that's being recorded is reading off the teleprompter. And that's exactly what the training sounds like for the entire time. And 10 minutes into it, you're like, I wish this would just end. So what I found is if I put two or three security experts in front of a camera and we start having a conversation about a particular topic, we get into the conversation, and then the audience kind of gets into it too, because why do people watch late night talk shows? Because they want to watch people being interviewed and stuff, So you can use that same type of a process from your content perspective. You got to do assessments to check people to make sure that they actually they actually are getting the core key learning things that you want them to take away from these videos. I never made these very hard. It wasn't designed for someone to prove PhD knowledge in application security. I just wanted them to, at least prove that they, watched the video or, understood the concept. And then it's always good to provide resources as well. This is something that you can, you always have people that want to dive deeper into the topic. It might be 10% out of all the people that do it. But there'll be some people that want to dive in, so give them some other channels to dive deeper into a particular topic that you approve of and you like. And this level 1 right here, this shows you what I usually recommend, at least as a beginning point from a content perspective. So I talked about that security fundamentals being the vocabulary. I think it's great to teach people about just generally the attacks and attackers that are out there. Why would someone want to break into our products? And it shouldn't be generic, right? It should be specific to your organization as far as why would somebody want to break in. Say you make a mobile banking app. Why would somebody want to break into our app? Make that content specific to your world, not generic to something that the person can look at and go, that doesn't apply to me. Security myths is always a fun one to do, like a Mythbusters kind of thing with all the things that we as security people know and love when people say. Like, oh, we have a firewall, we're protected. That's a great one. To always, it still exists. It's crazy that even in 2016 that still exists out there. Then when you get into that level 2, this is what I showed as my yellow belt on my leveling thing here. Now we need to go deeper. Okay, we need to, that white belt we talked about, the foundational, that's knowledge we want everybody to get. But when we get into this yellow belt and higher, we need to start providing some specific things for our web developers to deal with. And whether it's, a deep dive in the OWASP top 10, going into secure design principles, how someone's going to try to attack the stuff that they write. We're going into a lot more technical depth. I try to keep all the technical stuff out of that level 1 because I want salespeople to watch it. And if I dive into how you mitigate a SQL injection, the salespeople are turning it off. They don't, that's beyond what they want to deal with. This quickly is just a perspective on how I've developed content in the past and how I recommend people that want to create their own content. It's important to obviously start with that outline, but the instructional design, that's that psychometrician person that has knowledge of how learning works and things. And I've found so many different times where they've suggested changes that I'm like, I don't even understand why you'd want to do that. But when I see the final product, it's because they know that people learn different ways, right? People learn by hearing, some by seeing, some by doing. There's a whole science to it. So that's why you see them appear here twice. As you go from outline to making some slides, doing a technical review, they come back in at the end just to check those final slides. So when I do those video modules, I use slides in the backdrop just so we don't sit there and talk for 10 hours in a row. So we can scope down an individual topic, and the slides we just can kind of keep us honest as we go through. Humor and story. I mean, this is about how do we add a little bit of humor? How do we get people to chuckle as they're going through our content? Let's make some crazy videos that are Saturday Night Live-esque and put them, with the right amount of tameness, but include them right inside of our content, because we want our learners to, as they're watching the content, we also want them to be thinking, what are they going to do next? What could these crazy people possibly do? And then they're engaged with the content because it's not just boring security talk. There's craziness happening as well. This is an example. You can do this with something as simple as a still cartoon. I've done them in the past where we just use still cartoons and voiceovers, right? Because it's real cheap to do that. You can do that with your average laptop. You don't need a production studio to do that. You can do, I'm a big fan of spoofing. We've spoofed individual movies with kind of a security take. We did a whole Office Space set of these little blooper kind of things, if you're old enough to remember that movie. But yeah, it's just a way to add some fun into the mix and make it so it's not so boring and stodgy for people. Now, the one word of caution, this slide makes even more sense now that the Deadpool movie has come out. Not everybody thinks the same things are funny. Okay, so you have to stay at a PG level for any of these funny little cartoons and stuff you want to put in here. I had a script writer who wrote some content for us for a series we were going to include inside of some modules. And I got this thing back, and I'm reading through it, and I'm going, if I record these, I will be fired from this company. It was R-rated. It was a comedy writer. It was great stuff. It was hilarious, but it was like, I'll be fired if we record this. So I had to ask him, I say, yeah, can you make this a little more Disney? Maybe like a little, come down towards PG. Ours is a little too risky for corporate HR. So just be careful, with some caution there. Gamification, how do we make stuff fun and engaging for the learner here along the way? You can have, people use badges and things. You see this, if you use any of the Code Academy or any of those types of sites where they're doing, where you can do different training classes and things. Everybody's kind of captured onto this concept. But it's just a way, use badges. I've been a big fan of using the belts and levels as a way and that's all part of the gamification story here too. Gamification doesn't mean you have a video game that exists in the middle of your training or something. It just means you're going to use video game techniques and stuff to capture and get people engaged. And one of the greatest sources I've had for this is actually my 18-year-old son, who plays far too many video games, according to me. But he actually has a really good understanding of gamification because he can relate. When I talk about this type of stuff with him, he can take his experience as a gamer and help me to understand a little bit about how gamification can work because he's got more experience in it. So there's interesting places you can get kind of experience from the gamification side. Another place you can do more gamification is just in the user interface. This is a low budget mock-up of what you can do, but use every piece of real estate that your program has. If you have a website where people can click on the videos, don't just give them a list of video links to click on, right? Embed your theme inside of this launch screen. Let things be checked off when they finish it. People love things to get checked off on to-do lists. I don't know why, but human nature, I guess. But include your theme in this and include this, into your overall user interface. Another thing that I think of as gamification as well is provide a dashboard, okay? And this is something that you shouldn't think about in the beginning of launching this type of a program, but when you get about 2 or 3 years in, make a dashboard. And in that dashboard, have a data dump of all of the execs and show how many people they have at each level. And make it sortable and make it accessible to everybody in the whole company. Okay? Because you know that executives are not usually competitive people amongst their peers. Right? They're usually very docile and, no, it's okay that, George is better than, no, right? You show them, hey, you know what? This other executive is doing a lot better than you. And they got their ops director on the phone right away. Why are they better than us in this, So competition is just another way you can spawn, some interest in getting people excited about doing this stuff. So I guess from the key takeaways, the first one, everybody in here already knew about the impact of vulnerabilities, from our own developers' perspective. Think about changing security culture, opening eyes, filling brains, tasking hands, giving people, a knowledge of what they can do there. And then we had the 4 different pieces of an application security awareness program, from the architecture into the content, into the including humor, making a little bit of fun mixed into this, and then adding the gamification principles. And I guess my call to action here is that, this is something that any size organization can do, right? You can do this as one person. It's going to be really small, in the beginning. You're going to have to find some partners in different parts of the business to help you along the way. But you can definitely build your own, and I would encourage anybody that's even thinking about it just to dive in and pilot, create 1 or 2 videos and see what happens, Maybe it'll do like the program we had at Cisco did, where we created the first belt and we sat back thinking nobody's probably ever going to watch this, within a couple of months, we had 5,000 people that had gone through it because it just caught fire and people got interested in doing it. So crazy things can happen, but I didn't have to build the whole thing first. I could build a small piece, release it, and let it out there. So your customers and everyone else in your company will ultimately thank you for giving application security the right amount of attention. So with that, I think I have, 32 seconds for a lightning round question.